Okay, this is the Interfaced Hem Technique sample. A couple things to talk about before we get started. The book talks about marking your hemline, which I did with, I did a purple line here. And then it says to cut pretty wide interfacing. I went ahead and did it about 3 inches. That's what the book recommended. It kind of talks about that, day wear typically would have a 2 to 4 inch wide interfacing, and then evening wear would be much wider, maybe 10 to 12 inches. It's not set in stone. It's something a designer can choose. So I went ahead and started with our 3 inches. Now it also talks about the type of fabric you have, whether it has backing or not. So my fabric does not have some kind of special backing. It's not really that thick. It's pretty thin. If you have a thicker fabric that has like kind of a different type of fabric on the back, you would actually be doing a lot of these stitches to the backing and not catching the face of the garment. Since my fabric does not have backing on it, it has vertical seams. So you might see vertical seams at a princess seam, at the side seam, maybe there's darts, maybe there's back darts, maybe there's a back seam. So that way you could stitch your interfacing to the vertical seam allowance if you don't have backing. That's what it's trying to talk about. Okay, let's see here. So step 1, it says go ahead and cut out the bias strips to use for interfacing. Make it the entire length of the hem. So mine is 3 inches, actually a little bit longer than my hem. Spread my garment on the table wrong side up and pin the interfacing on the garment so that it laps my hemline 1/2 inch. So that's why I drew that 1/2 inch line, so I could really see how much to overlap it. And then it asks us to just go ahead and pin it in place. Okay, step 3 says to use catch stitches to sew the upper edge of the interfacing to the backing, or in our case, to our vertical seams, because I don't have backing. So I will go ahead and do a catch stitch and attach it to the seams. I'm not going to catch the face of the garment. Step 4 says at our hemline. So again, our hemline right now is covered. It's this purple line here. My interfacing is passing it by 1/2 inch. So at this purple line, it wants me to attach my interfacing. And it's giving me a choice. It says I can attach it lightly to the garment with long running stitches. So if I did that, I'd really have to see where my hemline is. I can kind of see through the interfacing and I could see my markings. But if you can't see it, you might want to try the other way, where it says, or fold the interfacing at the hemline. So I'm actually going to take out these pins. And fold it at the hemline, the interfacing right along the hemline, and then put in a blind stitch securing it. So I think I'm going to go ahead and try that method. One other part of step number 4, it's the last sentence, and the author talks about when sewing vertical seams, and if they're closely spaced, she doesn't sew the interfacing at the hemline. So when I did it, I was just trying to catch just the seam allowance and not the actual garment, since we have that extra fabric there at the vertical seams. Okay, I'm reading step 5. It says on lined garments, use catch stitches to sew the top of the interfacing to the garment or its backing. Well, we already did that, so I think it's kind of just repeating itself if you have a lined garment or not. But then it goes ahead and says to complete the hem, which woohoo, we would love to complete our hem, fold and baste it in place. Okay, so I'm going to fold it on the fold line. So I'm going to have to move these pins out of the way. Okay, I'm going to fold this guy, there we are, on on our full line, our hemline. And I have my basting thread. It's a little bit waxy, easy to rip and tear. And I'm just gonna go ahead and baste this down so it stays. I might just baste through all the bulky thicknesses. It didn't really specify where, and I don't see any illustration either. So maybe you can do what you think is best. Maybe we do 2 rows of basting if we think we need it. I don't know. Okay, there we are. Pull that through. Great. Okay, so I got my basting in there. Okay, and then the next step is to use catch stitches or running stitches to sew our hem to the interfacing. So this is our hem. We want to sew it to the interfacing. Now, because our interfacing is wider than our hem, this is suitable for an unlined garment. For a lined garment. If this was going to be unlined, we would really want our hem to actually be covering it so you don't see it. So in this case, I'm demoing what should be a lined garment later so that the lining would cover the interfacing it's showing. But never mind that. My next step is to sew this hem to the interfacing, and I can choose either catch stitches or running stitches. So I'm going to get my regular thread and go ahead and do that. Okay, this is the finished hem. I will say, you can kind of see the blind stitches, which we really don't want to be able to see those. So the smaller those are, the better. But I wish you guys could feel it. It's definitely very sturdy and would be so fun to wear as a skirt, some kind of formal dress. It's pretty neat technique. But there we are. That's the end.